In the city centre, they're getting ready for Christmas. But behind the pretty decorations, the fear of what is coming round the corner. People are bracing for a bleak winter. Hard to feel tempted by the festive treats when inflation for basics like bread and milk is at a 40-year high.
British people are tough, inventive and resourceful. We have risen to bigger challenges before.
For frontline council workers, on a training day organised by the GMB union, nothing the Chancellor offered convinced them life was about to get any easier.
I think we're all going to end up paying more tax because the tax allowances are not moving.
If you go to hospital, you're going to be waiting around for 4 hours in accidents and emergency. That's not best value for the service, and yet we're paying ever higher taxes.
How will paying more tax, if that happens, impact your budgets? Because budgets are tight.
If I give you an example, last night my wife spent an hour trying to glue my daughter's school shoes back together because we can't afford to buy her a new pair. I mean, I'm 65, I've worked all my life, and we can't afford £20 for a pair of shoes. There's something wrong with society.
But even with the help they're offering today, you don't think, you know, he's extending the energy support package, he's helping people on benefits with one-off payments?
So with the gas, electric and my mortgage, that's 75% of my wages gone without anything else, without any, council tax, water rates, car insurance, petrol, food, any of that. 75% of my wages gone.
I can't remember the last time I went to a pub because I can't pay, £5 for a pint. It's beyond my means. So the local pub's now closed. Not entirely due to me not going there, but that's closed.
Every week our numbers are going up and up and up. And it's huge and it's everyone.
The scale of the problem the Chancellor's plans must fix here is writ large at the Ward End Food Bank. They're spending £2,000 a month buying food because donations have dropped so much, while they're also seeing more people who are in work who must rely on charity to feed their families.
We're getting student nurses, we're getting teachers' assistants, we're getting some teachers. We're getting all sorts of people. All I know is that the poor are getting poorer, and also the mid-range people are getting much poorer.
For some of the people arriving today for the first time, it was clearly a difficult experience.
I've just spoken to a young woman, pregnant, mother of 2. She didn't want to go on camera. She's a care support worker helping deaf and blind people, but she's had to come to the food bank for the very first time because she says while everything is going up, her wages have stayed the same and she can simply no longer afford to feed her family.
Birmingham's Labour-run City Council already declared a cost of living emergency back in September, pledging an extra £5 million to help people struggling to afford the basics. Where does today's statement leave the council?
Well, I believe this is a return to austerity for local government. It's extremely disappointing.
The government have been quite clear. They say this is not austerity. They have made many provisions for people on lower incomes. They've protected pensioners. They say it's a very compassionate budget.
All of which is good stuff, but people rely heavily on council services. We'll be faced with the choice between cuts to services or putting up the council tax by the extra 2%. But I have to say that 2% for Birmingham, that raises around 8 million. Next year, our increase in energy bill alone is 18 million.
Somewhere to shelter from the cold while saving on your energy bills. This warm bank, run by the Northfield Community Partnership, opened 2 weeks ago. It's been a godsend for 64-year-old Frank, who's out of work. His benefits will rise with inflation, but he may also be one of hundreds of thousands of claimants who were told today they have to do more to find a job.
What do you think the additional pressure will mean for you? Is that hard to cope with?
Mentally, certainly. Maybe even physically. I don't know.
Do you find it hard?
Yes, yes. I've been out to work some time now, and the working world has changed, the marketplace. It'd be an alien environment to me.
And so are you optimistic at all about the future?
Optimism? It's not a word I use a lot these days. I'm not familiar with the term. I hate to sound negative, but optimism, it probably doesn't come into my vocabulary.
That lack of optimism was reflected often here. The Chancellor promises a recovery will come. The question is, how long will people have to wait?
And tomorrow we'll be with a live audience in Darlington to get their reactions to today's announcements. A little earlier, I spoke to Labour's Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves for her reaction to today's statement. The Chancellor is talking about increasing spending on education, on health, a windfall tax, an increase in the living wage. This is tanks on Labour's lawn. You must be worried.
I'm not worried at all. I am, though, concerned about the impact of today's announcements on ordinary working people who are already seeing their incomes being eroded by double-digit inflation and are now seeing their incomes eroded further by stealth taxes and increases in council tax. And what people will be asking at the next general election is, are me and my family better off under the Tories? And the answer we now know is no.
I mean, you've talked about the Tory nightmare. At the next general election, what's the Labour dream? Is it just to outspend the Tories?
Well, I want Labour to win the next election because we are seen as the party that can be trusted with the public finances and trusted to deliver on living standards, on economic growth. I set out today some of the fairer tax changes that Labour would make, as well as a proper plan for growth. Labour's Green Prosperity Plan, our reform to business rates to help small businesses and high street businesses to thrive, our plans to make Britain the best place to start and grow a business, and our reforms to ensure that the Brexit mess that the Conservatives have made is sorted out to help UK businesses to trade and be competitive internationally.
Labour has struggled in the past to be seen as fiscally responsible. The government has relaxed its own fiscal rules today. Which fiscal rules will you stick to?
Well, in the last 12 years, the Conservatives have now broken all 11 of their fiscal rules. I've set out how Labour would do things. We've said that we must pay for day-to-day spending through tax receipts, that we would get our debt down as a share of our economy, and subject to that, we would invest in the industries of the future to ensure that we get jobs, investment and opportunities here in Britain. And I've been very clear, there will be nothing in Labour's next manifesto that isn't fully costed and fully funded. That is the commitment that I can make as Labour's Shadow Chancellor.
So you'll stick to spending cuts?
But the point is that different choices can be made. I set out some of those today. How Labour would get rid of the non-dom tax status, how we would ensure that banks and private equity managers would pay their fair share of tax, how we would introduce a proper windfall tax without all of the loopholes to ensure that energy giants who are benefiting from a windfall of war pay their fair share to help ordinary people keep their bills low. Those are just some of the different choices that we would make on tax, but also our plans to grow the economy, to lift living standards and ensure that money flows into the Treasury. We've been missing out on growth the last 12 years, and as a result, living standards now are going to be no better than they were a decade ago.
So just to be very clear, you will not be sticking to public spending cuts?
Well, first of all, we don't know what the situation we're going to inherit in 2 years is. We've had 4 budgets already this year.
Where's the vision, Rachel Reeves? You need to offer a vision. We can't just keep pointing to the government saying they're the bad guys. What's Labour offering?
Labour's Green Prosperity Plan to invest in the industries of the future, from green hydrogen to carbon capture to offshore wind to renewable-ready ports, and our plans to invest properly in our health service with a workforce that we need by closing the non-dom tax status.
Isn't the reality that Britain is stuck in this rut of high inflation and low growth, and there's only so much any government can do without spooking the markets? That's what we've seen in recent months. It's just managerialism.
Well, the legacy of the last 12 years is exactly that. Low growth, high inflation, and it's ordinary working people who are paying the price with higher mortgages, higher rents and higher bills. We've got to break out of this vicious cycle of stagnation, as a former Chancellor described it, and instead get us on a path to growth, which is why Labour have set out the Green Prosperity Plan to get good quality jobs in all parts of Britain, to make Britain the best place to start and grow a business, to reform business rates, to invest in apprenticeships, different choices that Labour would make and that we will set out in our next manifesto.
OK, Rachel Reeves, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Fatima.
Labour Shadow Chancellor. Well, in the Commons earlier, the Liberal Democrats said today's statement would mean for the average family, taxes and bills would go up by thousands of pounds.
This cost of chaos budget will cause untold pain for everyone. Soaring mortgages, unfair tax hikes and further cuts to our struggling public services. This Conservative government has plunged the economy into chaos, and now they are forcing ordinary families to pay for their incompetence. For an average family, this will mean thousands of pounds in increased taxes and bills.
Well, not all of the spending decisions made today by the UK government apply to Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, because areas like education and health are devolved. Extra money will instead be passed to the devolved administrations using the Barnett formula, a mechanism used by the Treasury to allocate expenditure. Our chief correspondent, Alex Thompson, is in Glasgow. Alex.
Yeah, well, I'm aware you've been thoroughly bludgeoned with figures all day today, so I promise I'll keep it to just three key ones. It's roughly, for public spending, around 1.5 billion for Scotland, 1.2 billion for Wales, and some 625 million for still assembly-less Northern Ireland. So what do they make of it? Well, Wales's finance minister said today she said, an invoice being sent to the people of Wales for 12 years of the Conservatives' mismanagement of the economy. She said it was simply pain today and more pain tomorrow. I think it's fair to say Jeremy Hunt would probably agree with that last bit of that judgment. Here in Scotland, the nation woke up to Deputy First Minister John Swinney saying we need some key things from this budget statement. We need the pensions triple lock kept in place. We need key benefits rising in pace, keeping pace with inflationary rises, a little over 10%. And we need a meaningful windfall tax on the energy companies. Now, we pretty much got that. So I set off this morning across from Glasgow to Edinburgh to see just how overflowing with joy Deputy First Minister was with what Mr Hunt had come up with.
There's measures that are welcome in what the Chancellor has done in taking the decisions, particularly about the protection of low-income households. But that all masks the fundamental economic weakness and decline of the United Kingdom, which is a product of Conservative decisions on Brexit, Conservative decisions in the folly of that mini-budget in September, the consequences of which we will be paying for many, many years to come. So,
Chancellor acknowledged that, to be fair.
Well, he did, and it's important that he does acknowledge that, but it's also important that he does something about these underlying issues.
More widely, I suspect tonight the people of Scotland will be in consensus with fellow voters in Northern Ireland and indeed in Wales and indeed in England. And it's simply this, that how often it is that what pleases the markets and the city punishes our wallets and our pockets. Back to you.